Well, Joe Biden just may ignite America's final death blow. And what I mean by that is right now, the mainstream media, New York Times, is literally begging Joe Biden to create George Orwell's 1984 Ministry of Truth here in the United States of America. They are literally asking for the creation of a reality czar, which is what they're calling it, that basically gets to decide if you get to share certain information on social media platforms, on your websites, or fill in the blank. You see, this is exactly what happens in communist countries like North Korea, China, and this is the kind of thing that went on in Nazi Germany with Mao. While they didn't have the internet then, they did it via the media, and this is literally what New York Times is begging Joe Biden for. This would basically give them a monopoly on facts. It would give the government the ability to decide what is and isn't true, and also to decide what they want you to hear and what they don't want you to hear. It would not allow for any more questioning the narratives. You can't even question anything anymore, and it will label truth pretty much as anything they want. They'll label truth a conspiracy theory. Oh, and of course, they'll be able to put what subjects they want to talk about and what subjects they don't want you to talk about. Kind of like they're doing now with COVID and the election, right? But on a much massiver scale. This is why I got to encourage you guys, get on over to Restricted Republic when the crap hits the fan, so to speak, and it's already in level. This is where I'm going to end up. And I got to tell you, there's so much more that I want to say on this broadcast that I really can't, but I can really get into nitty and gritty over on restrictedrepublic.com. And we've got so many videos up there that are uncensored, unrestricted reports. And it's not just me there. I'm also there with Justice Knight. So there's a couple of us spreading information about the truth of what's going on now. So use the code Trump and you can get it for $5 a month. This is an amazing special. All right, I got to move on. Let's get on to this article from the New York Times, because you guys got to see this thing. This is titled, How the Biden Administration Can Help Solve Our Reality Crisis. See how they're so keen on words. These steps, experts say, could prod more people to abandon hoaxes and lies. You know, anything that they deem as a hoax or lie. And I went to the archive to get this just in case they ended up changing information. But let's read on some of what's going on. And it starts up here and it says, the muddled, chaotic information ecosystem that produces these misguided beliefs doesn't just jeopardize some lofty idea of national unity. It actively exacerbates our biggest national problems and creates more work. Wait, what? For those trying to solve them. In other words, because of all the misinformation, it makes more work for our leaders, our government, right? But then they go on, and it raises the question for the Biden administration, quote, how do you unite a country in which millions of people, they say, have chosen to create their own version of reality? Let me just pause. We're smart. We're not stupid people. We get to decide ourselves what we want to look at or what we want to believe. And the government here, or New York Times here, is literally saying you don't have a right to figure out what that information is or do research for yourself. You're not smart enough. Let us handle that for you. This is communism. This is tyranny on a massive scale. But it goes on. In the past year alone, we have seen conspiracy theories cause COVID-19 vaccine delays, sabotage a wildfire response, and engineer a false election fraud narrative. We have also seen that it left unchecked network conspiracy theories and online disinformation campaigns that could lead to offline violence, as they did during last month's deadly Capitol riot. Let me pause right there. I have a lot more that I can say, but that's going to have to go on Restricted Republic because I just can't do it here. But that said, right, here's what I will say. Information, you can't censor information or what people can talk about because it's either all free or it's not free. Let me make that very clear. And anything can be used to initiate violence, right? This is why we have freedom of speech. So I gave this example before. This is just an example. If I say, if I made a bland statement, I think, the Democrats are evil people, right? If I make that statement, this is an example, and somebody goes and says, I heard Lisa Havens say that Democrats are evil, so I'm going to go and commit this violent crime against a Democrat. Well, I'm not held responsible for some idiot lunatic who wants to go and hurt somebody violently because of something that I said or anything of that nature. You see, you can take anything out of context, anything. You can take it and blow it up and say it causes violence, literally anything. If somebody is against abortion, you could say, oh, well, because so-and-so is against abortion, this guy went and did this crazy act. And so we're going to hold the person who said they're against abortion accountable. You see, this is what the New York Times is literally doing. They're using freedom of speech and saying freedom of speech causes people to be violent. This is why we have our constitutional rights of freedom of speech, and the New York Times is asking to infringe on that. You see, and they're doing it by saying it can lead to violence. Well, everything under the sun, the way you're labeling it here can. It's not a line that we want to cross. We're either all free or we're not free, right? But it goes on. I've spent the past several years reporting on our national reality crisis, and I worry that unless the Biden administration treats these and anything can be called a conspiracy theory. We saw all that this past year, by the way, and disinformation as the urgent threats that they are, because they go against their narrative, right? Our parallel universe will only drift further apart, and the potential for for unrest and civil dysfunction will only grow. So in other words, they get to decide what information is true and what information is false, and the mainstream media gets to decide that for you, because they've done such a good job, not sarcasm in that statement, but they get to tell you what is a conspiracy theory, what isn't. They get to decide. They get to have a monopoly on facts. But it goes on to address the question, okay, how do we do this? Basically, how do we fix this truth issue, right? It says, Joanne Donovan, the research director at Harvard University's Shortstein Center on Media, Politics, and Public Policy, blah, 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 suggested that the Biden administration could set up a truth commission. Welcome to Communist China and North Korea, similar to the 9/11 Commission to investigate the planning and execution of the Capitol siege on January 6th. This effort, she said, would ideally be led by people with deep knowledge of the many network fractions that coordinated and carried out the riots, including white supremacist groups and far-right militias. So a truth commission. It's kind of like what AOC and all of them have been calling for, right? A Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And they're begging Biden for this. This is North Korea on steroids. What happens to the people, okay, when you don't agree with their truth? What happens to us if we say something that they don't like, say about COVID or about the election? What's the punishment? Is it just that we get removed from all the social media platforms or, But it goes on and they expand a little more. Appoint a reality czar. Several experts I spoke with recommended that the Biden administration put together a cross-agency task force to tackle disinformation and domestic extremism, which would be led by something like a reality czar. Someone who wants to control the narrative, a reality czar. Again, thought and questioning will be canceled out. You can no longer question. You can no longer ask the question. You can no longer inquire, research, look at. Because if they get to disseminate what is and isn't fact, based off of something bad could happen, right? Then there is no questioning the narrative anymore. It is literally gone. Get over to Restricted Republic, by the way. Moving on a little bit more. Renee DiResta, a disinformation researcher at Stanford's Internet Observatory, gave the example of two seemingly unrelated problems. Misinformation about COVID and election fraud. Often, she said, the same people and groups are responsible for spreading both types because they talk about both. God forbid you can't question anything. So instead of two parallel process, one at the Center for Disease Control and Prevention aimed at tampering down COVID-related conspiracy theories, and another at the Federal Election Commission trying to correct voting information, a centralized task force could coordinate a single strategic response. And how do they go about doing this? And this is a huge statement here. And keep in mind, they're already doing this, right? But the task force could meet regularly with big tech organization, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of that, and push for structural changes that could help those companies tackle their own extremism and misinformation problems. For example, it could form a safe harbor exemption that would allow platforms to share ideas about QAnon and other conspiracy theory communities with research and government agencies that without running afoul of privacy laws. It always runs afoul of privacy laws, and it could become the tip of the iceberg or spear for the federal government's response to the reality crisis. In other words, big corporation, the US government, and social media all in bed together, working together to disseminate information of what is and isn't correct and what is and isn't true. That is the Ministry of Truth spoken of in George Orwell's 1984. And it is exactly what they do in China. China arrests journalists when you speak against the narrative that they don't want out. This is our narrative. This is it, no matter what. You don't question it. And we are literally having that called for by our media organizations who are supposed to be for the people. This is why I've always said Project Mockingbird, CIA in bed with the mainstream media, right? And that's not a conspiracy theory, but hey, maybe they don't want you to talk about that, right? The experts I spoke with warned that tech platforms alone couldn't bring back the millions of already radicalized Americans, nor teaching media literacy is going to be a silver bullet to prevent dangerous ideas from taking hold. So they could, basically, this is an under the radar way of saying so many people in the United States have been radicalized by what was already allowed to be shared online, and we have to create a truth commission or re-educate the masses, like the re-education camps that have been called for by many, many Democrats already. And I played it on Restricted and I played it on here. We should immediately turn off any and all information we get from the New York Times, just close it down altogether. And the only reason I bring you this article is because we need to know the radical side, what they're actually calling for happens, by the way. A lot of what they ask for ends up coming to fruition. And Joe Biden doesn't mind changing the laws here in America with a flick and stroke of his pen. Anyhow, I want to just remind you guys, please don't forget to check out my partner. Without them, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing here. But right now at Noble Gold Investments, if you convert your 401k to a Roth IRA, something backed by gold, silver, precious metals, because we don't know what tomorrow holds, then they are also giving away this Apollo 11 coin. And this thing is freaking awesome. You could see it here, and you can see the back of it there. But this comes with any approved IRA. So give them a call. Let them know Lisa Haven sent you, and check them out at noblegoldinvestments.com. Anyhow, I love all of you. Thanks again for tuning in. I'm Lisa Haven, signing out.